Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Spirit Reflections Around the Fire Conversations. My name is Fred Gouveia, and I'm really happy to bring here to our Around the Fire episode a very dear friend, Suzana Simões, all the way from Miami, Florida. Sue, say hi to everybody. Good evening. Welcome.
Hi, Fred. Good evening. Good evening to everyone. Thank you for having me here with you today. I'm very excited about this opportunity.
Pleasure to have you, Sue. We're going to have a really impactful conversation, I think, that speaks to both of us on a very personal level, and one that I've learned a lot from listening to you talk about it, both in formal as well as informal environments. And so this one, we're going to build upon it as we wrap our heads around the concept of sexuality versus gender versus culture versus nature, and how it all ties to our spirituality. And so let's welcome everybody here who's already arriving. José Lima, bem-vindo, welcome. Roger, my husband, thank you for being here, welcome. Good evening. Solange Lemos, who's a fan of Suzana. She's here also with us. Good to have you, Solange. And as people start to arrive, we're going to recommend that you ask your questions, participate. Let's make this as interactive as possible. And for those of you that are coming to Spirit Reflections for the first time, it was a channel that was started during the pandemic in 2020 with the aim to bring people to talk about their personal and their spiritual journeys, and in what ways they found tools along the way that have shaped the work that they do and who they are today. And we bring scientists, philosophers, artists, religious people, even some skeptics in the past who have no spiritual or religious affiliation, but to talk about their journey and how it resonates with people that are watching. And we always do the fire in the background to connect with the idea that we sit in a community at the end of the day and we huddle around that light, that fire, look up in the sky and place ourselves in a position of wondering where we're going, why are we here, where we come from. And so this is the backdrop of our conversations. And so Yvonne is here. Welcome, Yvonne. Marinês. Valéria, good to have you, my dear. Wonderful people, wonderful people. So Sue, let's get right to it. Tell us a little bit about your background, how it all started.
Okay, so from the beginning, so I was born in Rio, born in a Spiritist family. So my grandmother, actually, we were just talking before the program started, and my mom and my dad are first cousins. So my grandfathers were brothers, and right, so my maternal and paternal grandfathers were actually brothers.
Wow.
And yes, wow is right. That explains a lot of things about me. Yeah. So all that to say that in a way it's kind of one family, and so both of my grandmothers were spiritists. So my mom is also a spiritist. My grandmother was a founder of a spiritist center in Rio, a pretty big spiritist center that started in Rocinha, the biggest slum in South America, in Rio. Um, my mom later on opened another spiritist center that today works at Gavia neighborhood in Rio. So that's I grew up in the spiritist movement. I was active as in the youth movement. I participated, for example, in carnival encounters in Rio, where we would go and actually sleep in schools for like, or special places for like 2, 3 days, and spend the entire carnival praying, studying, and things like that. At the age of 18, I left the youth group.
These were like week-long retreats, right?
Yes, it was like, yeah, 3, 4 days, 3, 4 days. Yes. And then, you know, at the age of 18, I joined my first basic course in Spiritism at another center in Rio. And that was pretty much it. That was pretty much my beginning in Brazil. Believe it or not, something funny that I don't think anyone knows, but I was in a lot of spiritist plays as a kid, and
Oh,
often I
really?
was Mary, Jesus' mother. At the time, I had long hair, blonde hair, straight hair, and so I played Mary a couple
Wow.
of times.
I
I
wonder if
know
you have photos of that time because you
I
look totally
do.
different.
I do. I mean, I actually do have one picture. So that's it. And then, when I was 23, 24, I moved to the US.
Okay,
Um,
early age.
yes, yes. So I had just graduated in college with my degree, my bachelor's degree in physical therapy.
Physical therapy.
And yes, and I got a job at the University of Miami, and moved to the US initially for 2 years. And then University of Miami kind of kept renewing my visa, and I end up staying, got my master's, my doctoral degree, and here I am.
Beautiful. And today you have two beautiful children, a lovely wife of many years, Sherry, who I adore and admire a lot. And but before we go to today's Susanna, you painted an image of this Mother Mary of Jesus at the age of in your adolescent years, teenage years, where you were a blonde, long-haired looking person.
Yes.
And that sounds like it's very much gender conforming to the cultural norms, right?
Well, it was, I mean, I actually at that time, um, it was really just the way my hair was, and I don't know. I mean, there are other things about my childhood and growing up that were like that. For example, my mother is very, very, and has been her whole life. Today, a little bit more less, but it's someone who grew up in a very, very gender structured way. And so, as a preaching, and she always wanted my room to be pink, and I had a bed that had a pink and white like cover on the bed, and there was a mirror, and everything was like pink. And I told her a few times that that wasn't necessarily me, the way I would love to have my room. At that time, I started feeling a little uncomfortable with, all the pink wall that, she wanted for me.
Uh,
But the
Around what
Mary,
age
the
was
Mary,
that?
the Mary thing was a little younger, and I wasn't there yet.
Got it.
I would say, I don't know, it's a guess, but I'm gonna say 12, 13, 14.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
As I wonder, so in your trajectory, in your identity and discovering parts of yourself, and how some of those parts might have clashed with the society around you. In my own personal journey, the sexuality piece came much later. And even later than that, the gender piece came. I was completely unaware of the gender piece. I was so stuck on the sexuality piece for so many years. How was that like for you?
Yeah, a lot of clarity in around these terms, and the meaning came much later in my life as well. So, first of all, I never had much conflict growing up with my sexuality. I never thought of myself as gay. Um, that wasn't really even inside the realm of possibilities for me.
Okay.
So it was when I was 18 that I went to college, that I met a group of girls. There was a class ahead of me that I started to develop a friendship with them, and then eventually I started feeling sexually attracted. But before that, I did have a number of, not a number, but a few boyfriends, and I had two boyfriends with whom I had very serious, committed relationships. Um, and I was very fine in these relationships, and I was very comfortable in these relationships. I had no conflicts within those relationships. So it was not something that in my life, like a lot of people grow up with conflicts and, struggles. It wasn't really part of my upbringing. It's something that happened later on. And at that moment, when I had my first relationship, then yes, then I'm like, what is this? And why do I feel so comfortable in this? And
Okay, so through the contrast of a first relationship with a woman, that's when it dawned on you. Okay, now this feels more real for me, or more comfortable
yeah,
for me.
more comfortable, yes, for sure. And then the gender part, right? It was always in my life to some extent. Um, I became more and more aware of it in my adult life. As when I was in college, I had like really, really long hair, all the way to my shoulders. And it was just like, through my teenager years, I used to wear like large clothes, um, but that was more related to the teenagers and the discomfort with the body, the changes in the body, the type of stuff. But later on, as I became more and more myself, as I became more certain of who I was and more comfortable with who I was, then it became more clear for me that it was very limiting, the whole gender identity, and having to conform to what society expected of me as a woman, and the behaviors and the expression and etc. At that point, this became a bigger issue for me. So actually, first I had some struggles in the area of sexuality once I realized that I was more comfortable with women than men. And then I had came the conflicts with gender. That came a little later for me. It's just really interesting how these things happen very differently from one person to another, and how the stories are all very unique.
True. And also, there's a part of us as we grew up at a time and place that we grew up in where challenging gender identity and norms was very rare. It wasn't something that we could find easily and say, oh, I identified with that. I resonate with that. Okay. So then we, in our own individual journeys, had our girlfriends and you had your boyfriends, and it felt natural. It felt like there was no struggle with that because it seemed like it was the only way to be. And who
Hmm.
are we to sort of like question that? So, as you mentioned, there are certain individuals that go with the gender dysphoria much earlier on, many of them trans, and that's a different struggle than the sexuality struggle, right?
Yeah.
So as we advance in the 21st century and this conversation becomes more widely available for us to challenge, to understand, to reflect on, how does the spiritual piece connect with this for you?
Yeah, that's something that I find really amazing in Spiritism, which is, this idea that we are spirits. And also, so we're spirits, so we're immortal, and our identity, our spiritual identity, right, is the result, is the outcome of our many, many experiences, not only in different bodies with different sex assigned to these bodies, physically, biologically, but also in different cultures and in different experiences, where sexuality and gender are treated very differently. So it what Spiritism does with this concept, it truly destroys all the little boxes and all the limits that are material and that have been created by by us, by humankind, right? So when we expect for someone to behave one way or another, we are, in a way, dehumanizing that individual, because to be human is to be everything. To be
Right.
human is to be holy. To be human is to have the potential for all expressions, expression of all emotions, and expression of all the divine forces that are present in all of us. So when I look at a person, whether that spirit is currently in a female body or a male body, what Spiritism invites us to do is to see beyond the material. That is a physical expression for the present moment and relates to the experiences that that spirit needs to undergo in this very limited time that we call incarnation. But beyond the physical body, there is an immortal being whose identity, who knows? Who knows where that spirit has been? Who knows what the experiences have been, right? So, what Spiritism does and challenge us to do is invite us to see the spirit for who, I wouldn't say he or she, but for who it is, the
Right.
spirit, in the sense that the spirit is not a binary. The spirit is a continuum of experiences. So this paradigm, um, destroys all these limitations and all these little boxes that we have built and try to fit our sexuality and our gender expression in these categories. When I came up with the title of the lecture, "The Dictatorship of Gender,"
Right.
believe it or not, I did get some phone calls from, close friends, from people who, are friends of mine, and if they're not friends of mine, they care about me, and they had concerns. What do you mean by that? They want to they wanted me to explain. And is it too aggressive? Is it too much? Um, so what the intent was to say that when you try to get something that is immortal and unlimited and fit within categories that are extremely material and limited, you create suffering for people. You create pain. And that's what, a lot of us, whether you're gay or not, I mean, a lot of heterosexuals struggle with the issue, the dictatorship of gender. A lot of men, heterosexual men, struggle
Yeah.
tremendously. So it's not a gay issue; it's a human issue.
Absolutely.
So the levels of depression and suicide in men, heterosexual men, because if you're a male, you're not really, it's not expected that you're gonna speak about feelings and that you were going to
Exactly.
cry, and you have to that you're going to be show emotions, or that you're going to be maternal.
Yeah.
So there's all these expectations, they're gender bias, that create for a lot of men incredible amount of suffering. And it's a dictatorship. It's being dictated by society. It's being dictated by the materialistic perspective. And
Absolutely.
so it's a topic that belongs to all of us.
For everyone that's watching, I'm putting in the comments section the YouTube link of this talk that Suzana gave a year or two ago in New York. It's under her channel, and I highly recommend that you take a look at it if this topic interests you, because this presentation she gave touches on so many topics that for many of us weren't even aware that there were issues for people. And the way she makes the connection between the spiritual and the human, the incarnate versus the discarnate, is truly, truly remarkable. It's definitely worth watching. So it's in the comments. Go on, Sue. Sorry.
No, that's so. I think in answering your question, that's what spiritism does, right? It really it doesn't resolve the issue because the issue is so ingrained in all of us, and I do speak about that into the lecture. But it's an invitation for us to expand our look and the way we look, the way we see each other. And
Yeah.
so gender bias, right, is within all of us because we have been reincarnating, and we have this has been part of our culture. This has been part of, who we are, how we identify. It's very strong. And again, going back to the talk, I bring this up. Like from the moment you're not even born yet, right? So there's the biggest expectations of the parents is it a boy or is it a girl? Nowadays, there is all these let's find out the gender of the child on Facebook, and there's like gender parties, right? So
Gender reveals, yeah.
yeah, which is really wild. And then, if you find out it's a boy or find out it's a girl, you're going to start speaking to that baby with different tones based
Right.
on the gender. As soon as the child is born, even the way you handle the baby is different. If you have a boy, like early on, you're going to start tossing that kid in the air, flipping him, doing a little bit, tumbling and rough play. Whereas if it's a
Oh,
girl,
it's like you're trying to emasculate the boy just to be safe.
yeah, and then if he's a girl, you're just gonna be more gentle. You just assume that she's more frail. So if that is part of who we are from the moment we're born, it's hard to divorce, right? To break away from all these that has been instilled in us, not only in this life, but in many lives.
Right. Yeah,
So
the deconstruction is
yes,
many times painful, and it's a long road. It's a
yes,
process.
yeah. So I have my share. Do you have yours? Are you
Absolutely.
gender biased?
I am definitely gender biased. I can, even in the homosexual world, the gay world, the gay male world has a lot of gender bias in the way that some men are known to be the tops versus the bottoms,
Right.
and how the bottom is somehow inferior and much more ridiculed than the top, who's supposed to be the active polarity, the dominating one. And it's incredible how the entire gay world subscribes to those gender norms within the
Yeah.
gay world. So people
Yes.
say, "Oh, this is heteronormative, heteronormative." Yeah, wait, it's not just in the hetero world; it's in the homosexual world as well. And I've many times wanted to try on a dress and maybe to paint my nails, but I've never had the courage to do it. And it's
Right.
not because I want to do it because I'm curious. I'm actually, as an experiment, want to see how people are going to react to me if I show up like that, and just as a sociological experiment, you know. And then how many people refrain from doing that because they want to be within that cultural norm, the programming of what a gender, of what a male gender is supposed to look, express, and feel like versus a female gender, right?
And that is where a lot of the pain is, right? So yes, I did mention that in the talk as well. I mean, I one thing that I like very much, I love it, is to play with clothing, which has to do with the gender expression, right? So one thing is
Right.
the gender identity. So how do you identify? And then how does gender express? And then for gender expression, there is like a really huge, there's a continuum, right? So I personally am always very attracted to people who mix uh, both energies. And I like doing that myself. So there are some days that I do like to dress, what would be the more traditional male dressing, or and sometimes, but I like, for example, to wear a shirt like this. It's a male shirt, but it has little flowers with a female touch. So that combination I find super sexy and super attractive. But there's a limit to where I go to. And I have had many experiences where, which is something socially accepted to wear a tie.
Right.
But um, there are times, right? So I could, if maybe I would wear a tie to go to work, but I refrain from doing that. And depending on where I'm speaking, I may or may not do that. I did in New York, where I was in New York, so why not? But I didn't do it in Brazil when I went to talk in Brazil, even though I wanted to. And where the pain lies is on the fact that there is a conflict between wanting to be true to yourself and wanting and needing to be accepted and to belong.
To feel like you belong. Yeah.
And that is one of the primary core human needs. Everybody needs to be accepted, and people need to feel that they belong somewhere, that they're accepted by the group. And so, a lot of times, um, individuals have to compromise, right? And they will compromise the expression of who they are
Right.
for love, for love. And that is very painful. It's very painful when you cannot be who you are. It's. I think I can't think of anything that is more painful than not to be accepted for who you are. Um, it's a painful experience, and sometimes it's subtle, sometimes it's not so subtle. Sometimes it might be your hair is too short, you
Right.
things like that, um, which is something that I deal with. It's an ongoing issue in my life. I it's funny because I really really like my hair curly when I have the curls on, and sometimes I let it grow a little longer. And it's a style that I love. But then when I cut it, I also love it. I think it looks sharp, and it's a different look, and it's amazing because every single person who I come in contact has something to say about my hair. And and a lot of times it is gender bias and they don't realize it.
Right. Yeah.
Sometimes it's not. I'm not going to say that's all the time. And there was a time these really bothered me. Um, it was actually very painful. Nowadays, because I have made peace with myself, and I'm a lot more secure and um, just in peace with who I am, in every single expression that comes out of me that is a true part of who I am, because I am as much as that girl that has the curly hairs all the way to my shoulders. I am the one that you're seeing right now.
Right.
Both true, faithful expressions of who I am. And so I just enjoy that I have the flexibility, different than you, for example, to play with my hair.
Right. True.
Yes.
And I think so. The biggest challenge I find still to this day is the distinction that people need to understand between sexual preference, sexual orientation, who am I
Uh-huh.
attracted to, versus gender identity and how I express my gender in the world. And people mix the two all the time, and then it becomes a confusing topic in their mind. And I think an offshoot of that is in the spiritual religious world, how unfortunately the vast majority of that area of of society still wants to dictate sexual orientation, sexual norms, and gender norms, and it actually drives away people who are coming of age, who are struggling with that pain in themselves, wanting to turn to some source of comfort that transcends the physical, and they will look for religious expressions as a source of comfort in order to understand and make sense of it. And unfortunately, the vast majority of the time, through dogma, it actually makes the situation worse. Instead of consoling, it actually opens the wound and pours like pepper in it, or hot sauce, and it makes it even more painful. So I guess, how would you navigate that, knowing
Yeah, I
spiritism?
mean, yeah. So let's two different things that you mentioned over there. So gender identity is, again, is how do you identify from within, right? Do you identify male, female, neither, right? And in between male and female, in the continuum, right? Where how do you identify yourself? It comes from within. The expression is how that's going to be expressed, and it can be behaviors. It can be, again, clothing, for example, is a great example of gender expression. But sexual orientation has to do with who you're attracted to. So if you identify female, whether you in a male body or female body, doesn't matter. If you identify that way and you're attracted by another female, then you have a homosexual type, affectionate type of attraction, right? So it is based on how you identify and who you are attracted to, who in the identification and the sex of that person that you were attracted to. So those are different things.
Right.
And then, religion, for me, for instance, when I first realized that I was gay, right? So my first thing, and let's put this into perspective. I was 18. So today I'm 51. So we're talking a few years back, right? The Spiritist movement has evolved quite significantly since then. But one of my first things was like, okay, I committed some mistakes in the past, and now I'm in this situation, and it is my job to fix it. So I am going to get myself in therapy and try to figure out and see if I can um, fix this problem. Pretty much, that's how I started.
Right. That
And
was the premise of your therapy in the beginning.
yes, it turned out that therapy really helped me to understand who I was, and actually it kind of backfired, if you will, in the sense that, again, it just helped me to be more comfortable with who I was. As far as the Spiritism at the time, and I'm not saying that it's Spiritism per se, but how Spiritism was interpreted and understood, it did,
Culturally.
yeah, it did create an incredible amount of suffering because I felt very bad about myself and very guilty. And so, so you carry this weight. Okay, I am a sinner. I
Right.
commit some serious sins in the past, and now I'm in this situation, and I have to amend for my errors. You know what I mean? And I have to,
Like it's some
um,
type of bad karma that you inherited from past
yeah,
lives, and that's why
and
you are suffering this, right?
I have to sublimate my sexual energy, right? So if I cannot have go back and having relationship with men, maybe I shouldn't have relationship anymore. Period, and just
Become a monk.
channel my energy to something else. So thank God we have moved from this. But for a lot of people, even in Spiritism still, this is really how it is seen and understood. And in that sense, it really is a disfavor
Right.
and creates tremendous amount of extra pain, extra suffering, and conflict.
Yeah.
So it can
That was my
be
experience too, the
tricky.
first few years of Spiritism as well. I found Spiritism when I was 20 years old. I only came out
Uh-huh.
of the closet and assumed that I was gay at 28. Those first 8 years of deep studying into Spiritism was from this perspective that you're sharing. I must have done something wrong. I have a problem in my sexuality that comes from past lives, from being promiscuous and a pervert. And this is something I need to get rid of inside of me. And it basically like gay conversion therapy. Like I didn't go
Right.
to gay conversion camp, but in therapy sessions, that was the
Yeah.
premise of many years that I did, wanting to get rid of this sexuality because inherently I was educated through Spiritism wrongly because of the culture at the time that I was carrying an inherently bad karma from previous lives, if I can put it that way.
Maybe you were. No, I'm kidding.
Right. That the
No,
beauty of
no.
Spiritism is that it
So
doesn't create a rule, right?
here's the thing. Here's the thing. So Emmanuel in Life and Sex will say that it is rare to find on our planet someone who does not have some type of, issue in the area
Struggle, yeah.
of sexuality, right?
Right.
So it's been a struggle for our humanity. I
8
can say,
billion of
I
us.
can say, I can say to you very, very calmly that I know for a fact that I didn't do a lot of good things. You know what I mean? I know because I feel inside myself. I have my struggles. I had my share of conflicts in this life. They are not resolved. They remain within me. But the difference is that I see my experience today as any experience
Right.
that we are all undergoing here on this planet. We are all of us, all the experiences that we're having because they are here to promote our growth. And
Right.
they have one outcome, one expected outcome. And the expected outcome is that we learn to love. So
Well said.
if we messed up in the past because we didn't know how to love, what life expects from us is that we learn to love. That's it.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter what gender you identify or to whom you are attracted to, as long as you are on the path of love, as long as you are committed to learn to love.
Including yourself, self accepting and loving yourself, right?
Absolutely, absolutely, including yourself, starting with yourself. That's a big part. So with that, I see homosexuality or heterosexuality as different experiences and different opportunities.
Right.
For spirits who are compromised with the law, all of us, all
Right.
of us in this planet of trials and expiations have our debts, our mistakes, our errors. But again, the situations that we live in today are the best situations to help us to grow. And nowadays, the Spiritist literature and my very, very favorite chapter um, is on Joana de Angelis, the book Family Constellation, chapter about sexual education, if I'm not mistaken, where she says, for the parents, if you have a child and you're identifying that child that he or she is homosexual, this is not a problem. This is not a problem. The problem is how their sexuality is going to be oriented, right? Is the ethical issue on how we deal with sexuality. And it's a moral issue. And the moral issue belongs to all of us humans. It doesn't belong to a group, doesn't belong to a gender, it doesn't belong to a group that is attracted by A or B. No, it's a moral issue. The issue that we have to deal with is the issue of morality, of ethics
Right.
into our relationships, no matter which ones they are. So
Right.
today, when I look at my trajectory and my life, I am 100% sure that I am on the right path because I have built a family and I have, I had a wedding in 2001. And, we know that spiritists don't do weddings per se in the traditional sense. But and we also know that Spiritism does not hold rituals, Spiritism per se, but we as humans, we still need rituals sometimes,
Right.
So we when someone dies, we need those rituals to help us with the grieving process.
Right.
And for me personally, I said, I know Spiritism does not have wedding, but I want to get married. And I want to get married in a church because
Beautiful.
spiritually, I needed to go through that external process of committing to help me to commit internally.
Internally. Beautiful.
Internally, and that was my proposal because I knew it was going to be very challenging
Yeah.
to stick to the marriage. And so it was very important for me to have that ritual. And
Right.
so I did, and I married twice, right? So I married again in 2005 when finally became legal. So if you look at this, and if you look at this story, then you can say, yes, I am learning. Yes, I am in the process of sublimation of my sexual energy because I know for sure that I play sadly that it is very likely that I have destroyed many families in the past by cheating, by having many partners, you know what I mean, by having more than one relationship. And so if I can't now be faithful in one relationship and, with all the struggles that, have happened in my life, you know, I am in the process of sublimation of
Right.
this energy because
Right.
that's Marlon has a lecture that he did. I don't know, one of the many conferences that we did together on sublimation. That is the absolutely top lecture, and he talks exactly about that. Right? What is sublimation? So if you had 10 partners in one lifetime and now you have one, wow, that is like an incredible progress in terms
Right.
of so
Yeah, and it's also not just a moral issue. There's cultural filters too. I've
mhm,
heard this from a lot of heterosexual men, for example, that cannot seem to be able to stay in one committed relationship. That in their minds they have to cheat because they're so programmed culturally to do it. Not saying that's an excuse, but it is possible that they could have well lived in countries and cultures and places in the world where polygamy was a part of society that was legitimately accepted. And when you mention
mhm,
marriage, for example, that you wanted to go through the ritual of getting married in a church, it legitimized to the society, to the tribe that you're a part of, that you belong, that this expression of your love for another woman is acceptable. And I
right,
think part of our growth spiritually, even within the Spiritist movement, was precisely what you mentioned, to not equate homosexuality with a morally questionable behavior from previous lives. In other words, the homosexual manifestation or life experience doesn't necessarily equate
right,
with some moral downfall from the past, but it could have very well have been habits, sexual habits, or habits of identity and affection that I nurtured in many lives. For example, I know for a fact that I must have been a Catholic priest a few lifetimes, and as a celibate priest, I only had men around me, and so that was the lower hanging fruit. And I definitely engaged in sexual behavior with those priests. So I definitely carry that trace in my spirit, which is a more familiar way to
Mm-hmm.
be relating with other individuals on a sexual level. So in the process, I'm sure I've done wreaked a lot of havoc too, but it doesn't mean that I necessarily reincarnated in this life as a gay man because I needed to expiate only. Like you said, it could. I think the umbrella of Spiritism welcomes all gender expressions, all sexual orientations, and makes them natural in the way for us to learn how to bring the self acceptance and the love for ourselves and others in the process, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, it's a good point, and Joanna does talk about that. So before, the only options we had was, you had a downfall or you're a missionary. And nowadays there's something in between where, it can be just another experience, a result of, like you said, past experiences or culture or whatever. That being said, the reality is, again, it is an energy that we as humanity struggle with. We struggle
Right.
with up to these days. It's not easy. We haven't really learned yet to manage our sexual energy and this
Right.
force in the most appropriate way. So it is
Responsible
just
way, a mature way.
just it is just very natural
Right.
that in the majority of the cases there is, maybe some of what you're saying, but also,
Right.
some misuse or poor use of this energy, because again,
Absolutely.
it is just very tied up with our nature, our primitivism, and the passions and everything else. But no, no, no. The most important thing is that it's no reason for shame. It's no
Right.
reason
For
for
guilt.
guilt or for devaluation of the self. You know, we all here together in this. We all, everything in our life is an expression of God's love, and it's an opportunity for us to grow, to transcend, to learn. So it doesn't do us any good to dwell in what I have done. If it, because if you know yourself minimally, you know your tendencies, you know your conflicts, you know what is difficult for you. And it's okay to know that, so that you can plan to change as you can, one step at a time,
Right.
one day at a time. Things don't change miraculously.
Right.
As long as you have that commitment to learn, to grow, to do better
Absolutely.
each day. That's what's
That's
really important.
that's why we've come such a long way through talk therapy, psychology, life coaches, and all these other various disciplines of helping each other to discover more about ourselves, to get to know more about ourselves. And I'm sure that with time, we're all going to get to the bottom of it, meaning that sexual energy, and find there a resource for our I think I don't want to say salvation because it's a little bit of a stretch, but in many ways the source of our strength. I have a friend who says something very beautiful. He says our sexual energy is like a nuclear power plant. It has the potential to light up a whole city or to cause a nuclear holocaust,
Wow, that's very well said.
right? It's like I can either do a meltdown or you can light up a whole town. Hello, Fernanda. Good to have you here. So, Sue, we're getting close to the end of our conversation around the fire. I wanted to see if you have any closing thoughts on your presentation on the dictatorship of gender, or any other topics that we've discussed that came up for you in the last hour that you wanted to close with.
Yeah, we end up talking about two things, right? We did talk about the dictatorship of gender, and we did talk about um, a little bit of homosexuality and the use of sexual energy. Um, I think my final thought is this: whoever you are holy. You know, you're fine. You're okay. You don't have to prove anything to anyone, including yourself, right? You are a child of God. And so it's really important that whoever you are, if you ever listen to this, if you're struggling, that you learn to identify the divine in you and learn to appreciate appreciate the diversity of who you are with all your expressions. They're all beautiful and they are all part of the human that you are. Don't let anyone tell you that you need to be different or that a part of you is not okay, because what that person is doing is projecting onto you his or her own discomfort with their own sexuality, with their own being. And so being healthy mentally, emotionally, is being able to embrace who you are, the divine, the human, every single expression, every single color, right? Every single particularity of your personality. That's what makes you you. That's
Yeah.
what makes you beautiful and unique. And the more you come in peace with the expressions of who you are, the healthier you're going to be. And also, the more able you will be also to embrace others and to work on your own biases, on your own limitations, because we all have those. I do
Absolutely.
talk quite extensively about them in the lecture. So
Yeah.
that's it. Just love yourself. Just appreciate every single detail of who you are, and it's amazing. It's amazing the freedom. I know you have been in the closet and have suffered tremendously with that, and I, to a lesser extent, but I have really not so harshly and compared to what so many other people go through, but I had my share of
Sure.
struggles and pains, and it's just like when you make peace with yourself, with who you are, it's just like it just living becomes so lighter, and there is so much joy in every moment and every day, because there is nothing more powerful than the possibility of being free, of freedom. And
Well said.
so, don't compromise your freedom, and commit to loving yourself each day.
Beautiful. And how do you translate this in the upbringing of your children and their generation today?
Oh, yeah, we're trying, right? We are trying to uh, work with them, and what children do is they put right on your face your own limitations, right? It makes it very tangible, and they become mirrors in certain ways. If you are able to see, you project onto them your limitations. So it's not easy, but we are definitely trying to raise them differently. And in that presentation, I put a picture of my son at the end. He has two earrings. He loves to wear pink jackets, and he dyed his hair. He's um, very kind of vain in a good way, and very into like his appearance, and likes to take care of himself. Sometimes he will paint his nails. He likes to do
Nice.
that. He does black. And I said to him, the kids are gonna say something at school. He's like, I don't care. And so it's good to see that.
Yeah.
We had more difficulties than he had. So when he's
Right.
you
Totally.
know we also fear for his safety, because that is the reality of the world that we live in. But this is it. I mean, he's a boy, um, you know, in a very traditional way. with his behavior, with his energy, and yet has this very fluid expression sometimes,
Expression.
which is beautiful, which is
Yeah.
like, it's like, so it's just like, it's just nice to be living in a world where things are a little wider, the possibilities are greater, and it's just beautiful. It's just,
Beautiful. It's freeing to see this younger generation liberate themselves in the way they express their
yeah,
gender. And it gives me a lot of hope for the future that in a few years from now, we're going to be looking back at these conversations and may say, wow, those people really struggled with those labels right back then. It's
yeah,
great
yeah,
that we don't have those struggles anymore. So I want to give
yeah.
you a big hug, Sue, to Sherry, to your children, to all the beautiful community of conscious living Spiritist group in Miami, Florida, my second home, and wish everybody that was here a wonderful night. Thank you so much for watching. Check out Suzana Simões' lecture online, The Dictatorship of Gender. It's truly an amazing lesson on the topics that we talked about. I'm going to put our closing vignette, Sue, and thank you for being with us
I,
here tonight.
you're very welcome. I just want to send a big kiss to your mom and to your husband. Nice meeting
That's,
you.
that's right. Hopefully, we'll see you in person soon. Take care, everybody. Have a good night.